President Trump signing multiple executive orders on AI after the All In podcast hosted tech and government leaders at a summit in Washington. Joining us right now is White House AI and crypto czar David Sachs. And David, welcome. We really appreciate your being here today. There's a lot that we've been trying to figure out, trying to understand what yesterday all means. And I wonder if you can tell us how the private sector reads all of this and what they will do in response.
Well, thank you for having me. I mean, first of all, let me just frame up what I think President Trump did yesterday. It was, I think, the most important technology speech by an American president since President Kennedy declared that we had to win the space race. And in a similar way, President Trump declared that we had to win this AI race. And I think you could argue that the AI race is even more important than the space race because it's going to determine who reshapes the global economy and who the superpowers of the 21st century are going to be. If the U.S. continues to lead in AI, we'll remain the most powerful country. But if we don't, we could fall behind our global competitors like China. And I think President Trump laid out a plan for winning this AI race.
David, I'd agree with you. I think this probably is more important than the space race. How far ahead of China do you think we are right now in this race? How long would it take for them to catch up? How do we prevent that from happening specifically?
So I think when you look at our lead in the AI race, it kind of depends on what level of the stack you're looking at. So if you look at the top of the stack with the AI models, we're only, I would say, months ahead of the Chinese models. They've done a good job with models like DeepSeek and Qwen. But if you go deeper in the stack, we have, I'd say, more significant advantages. So when it comes to chip design, our leading company is NVIDIA. Their leading company is Huawei. I would say that NVIDIA is still a couple of years ahead. Then you go deeper in the stack to chip manufacturing, and you've got TSMC on the western side of the ledger. And they're several years ahead of the Chinese national champion, which is called SMIC. So it just depends on what level of the stack you're talking about. But I think the most important thing is that we try to maintain this lead. We don't want to sacrifice it. And I think President Trump brought up a few really important ways of doing this. Number one is we have to unleash American energy. The new AI data centers, the new infrastructure we need to build is very power hungry. It requires a lot of electricity. And President Trump signed an executive order to build out AI infrastructure. And he's understood for a long time that we have to drill, baby, drill. We have to build, baby, build. We have to, again, if you want to have AI dominance, you've got to have energy dominance. So that was a huge part of the speech. Another area that I think is very important that President Trump talked about is AI exports. We want the whole world using the American tech stack. We want the world to consolidate around an American standard. If we don't provide that standard, Huawei surely will. And so I think President Trump brought up that, and he signed an executive order to make AI exports easier.
He also made commentary. Well, actually, let's go to the energy part of this first, because signing this executive order is one thing. There have been others who have theorized that you really need an infrastructure plan that's organized by the government, kind of like the national highway system was set up. Do you think we need something along those lines, or can private industry really step in and bring us the energy needs that are going to be upon us in the next couple of years?
Well, private industry is already investing hundreds of billions of dollars in this infrastructure build out. So the private sector investment is there. What we need to do is unlock it from the shackles of all this red tape. It takes years to get permitted. President Trump promised to make that easier, to bring the timeline down from years to weeks or months. There's environmental concerns that really tie up these projects, and he's tasked Lee Zeldin with solving those. So I think that we do need to have more of a partnership mentality with the private sector, but it's the private sector is going to do the building here, and we just need to get unnecessary red tape out of the way to enable that.
David, related to that, though, is this question of just how much energy is going to be consumed. We talk about it on this broadcast all the time, the amount of energy that's required, the amount of water that's required. Obviously, certain states are better adept and also have less regulations around them. But ultimately, you know, we've had some guests come on and say, you know, 5 years from now, all these governors who are begging for this stuff to happen in their state may say to themselves, you know what, electricity prices are going to go up in my state to consumers. There's a question if there's a hurricane, who ultimately, you know, gets the electricity in that because of the uptime requirements and guarantees that a lot of these tech companies are making with the data centers and therefore the energy providers, that could leave consumers out in the cold. How do you think about that dynamic?
Well, this is exactly why I think we have to build more energy. We have to unleash American energy, is because you don't want residential prices to go up every time you add a data center. It doesn't make sense. So it's true that in order to enable these new data centers that are very power hungry, you have to build more power generation. But that's the whole point of the executive order, and that's the whole point of President Trump's policy around making it easier to, again, drill, baby, drill. This is a campaign promise he made years ago, is that we had to make it easier to produce American energy. And he's had all of the above approach. I mean, he wants to make it easier for natural gas, for nuclear. He signed executive orders to make nuclear easier, and even what he calls big, beautiful coal. So I think that, the president has had this idea for a long time. He understands that more energy production is the basis for all future growth. And now that we have this AI boom going on, it's definitely the foundation for this AI, for the growth in AI as well. So I think this is the plan of the administration, is we got to produce more energy.
Hey, David, as the AI czar, people look to you for a lot of things, but you're a huge person from Silicon Valley, a huge figure in the industry. You grew up with PayPal next to Elon Musk. You learned an awful lot about that, and you're obviously invested in XAI as well. I just wonder how you look at the world in terms of open source or closed source models on these things, what you think about what OpenAI is doing right now. Do you have the same views as Elon Musk when it comes to what Sam Altman's doing, or do you see things a little differently?
Well, we don't take sides in which AI company is going to win. We just want to create the conditions, the environment for American AI to do well. And then within that environment or that ecosystem, we want to have at least several companies, maybe many companies competing. And we think that competition is good. That's what ultimately spurs America on. You know, under the Biden administration, they had this approach under this Biden executive order on AI of anointing a few winners in this AI race. That they had this mentality that they were going to centralize and control. And what we want to do is just create a level playing field so that we, let 1,000 flowers bloom. And, we think that competition brings out the best in everyone. That's how America wins, is we create the conditions for our private companies to compete with each other.
David, but speak to this if you can. I've marveled at how successful Elon Musk has been, even in the past year and a half, in terms of spinning up XAI. And I would argue a lot of that has been his experience as a genuine engineer in terms of hardware and understanding energy. I mean, a lot of what we're talking about here is about energy. There have been questions recently about Stargate, which, of course, is the endeavor that Sam Altman and OpenAI have undertaken with Masa, and how that's working out and how quickly that can get rolled out. How much, A, do you think that there's any issue with where Stargate is and how quickly that will roll out? And B, how much do you think that there's an issue of just how much experience and knowledge lives in Silicon Valley in terms of engineering to deal with this energy issue? Because the experience, with the exception of maybe Elon and some others who've dealt with hardware, is very different.
Well, it's true. I've spent time with folks from Silicon Valley and folks from the energy industry, and they are rather different industries. And in the past, they haven't intersected that much. And there are, I think, cultural differences between the industries. In the past, the energy industry, the grid, for example, has only grown by a couple of % a year. They just haven't ever had to contemplate the issues of hypergrowth. And then by contrast, Silicon Valley is really all built around how do you scale as quickly as possible. So, but I think what's happening now is those conversations are happening. The Silicon Valley companies are driving out new requirements by the energy companies. And I think there's a lot of learning and sharing that's happening across those industries. So I think this is going to be figured out, and it's going to be enormously helped by the Trump administration making it easier to produce more energy. That's really the key here to solving this problem.
We have a situation now through the One Big Beautiful Bill and what the White House did yesterday, where you're not going to have a lot of states and different jurisdictions that are setting new rules for AI in different ways that they have to compete. But you're still going to have to figure out how this works around the globe. You think of the Digital Services Act and what Europe has already done to some of our technology companies by trying to crack down on them. How do you and the president look at this in terms of how we kind of navigate other jurisdictions around the globe and what they can and can't do, what they should and should not be able to do when it comes to our AI companies?
Well, what the president said in his speech is that we don't want overregulation to cost us winning this AI race. And that overregulation could happen if the states go wild overregulating, and there is some indication that that's a possibility. You've got 1,000 bills going through state legislatures right now. And the president also said that these international bodies also should not impose a necessary regulation. So I think that this administration will push back on that, and we'll just have to see exactly how that plays out. But I think the basic idea here is that we have to prioritize winning the AI race, and we have to make sure that regulation is sensible. We're not saying that there shouldn't be any regulation, but we don't want there to be so much of it that it hobbles our AI companies and our innovation. And we also don't want so many different regulatory regimes that it creates a patchwork and it's confusing to our AI companies. So I think you'll see this administration pushing back in those areas.
What we did not hear, though, is any protection of copyright. In fact, the president himself said that copyright holders may just lose out on this, essentially. How do you make sure we win this race, but also not trample the rights of the creators underneath all of this as well?
Well, the president said that that AI models can't copy or plagiarize rights holders. So that's very clear. The question is around ingestion of data for AI training. And that is a question that's being litigated in the courts right now. And ultimately, what it will come down to is what is the fair use definition for AI training data. And I think the president started to stake out a position there that merely ingesting data for learning purposes is not a violation of copyright as long as the model, again, does not copy or plagiarize the output. Right. So we have a distinction here between inputs and outputs. And this is a question that's being litigated by the courts, but I think that President Trump's statements on this are very common sense, and I hope they will help guide this issue.
David, let me ask you about that, though. And this is maybe a philosophical question. So I've been writing a book for the last 8 years, a history book about 1929. And so I've ingested, if you will, hundreds of books, by the way, that I've read to learn about all sorts of different component parts. And hopefully some of those pieces end up not plagiarized, but in the book, and there's a bibliography and all of that, right? But that's one person. That's me doing that. And I can go to the library and get the books. I can go buy all the books. And I think we understand how that works. I think it's different, right, if a machine ingests the books and then can then not just spit out one book. It took me 8 years to do this, but can spit out a book, you know, every 3 minutes if it wanted to, and what the economics of that should actually look like.
Well, Andrew, I think you raise a good point, and we're in a new area here, and this all has to be figured out. But I would say two things. Number one is copyright historically has applied to outputs, not to ingestion or learning. And so, you know, I think we have to consider that. The other is something that President Trump talked about, which is if you're going to require AI models to have a deal with every single article on the internet, we're talking about millions of articles, and in order to use that, then how is that going to be feasible? From a common sense standpoint, you're just not going to be able to make deals with every single one of those rights holders. And China won't care. China's just going to, you know, they're going to suck in all the data. And so I think it will compromise our ability to win this AI race against China if they can use all the data, but we're hopelessly mired in impractical contractual negotiation.
David, real quick competition question. The president made a fascinating comment in his speech. He might have been talking to you, where he said he was asking about NVIDIA. He didn't know what NVIDIA was, and somebody told him that basically they own 100% of the market. He wanted to actually break them up, he said. Was that conversation with you?
No, I wasn't. I was not part of that one.
Wasn't you? The second related competition question, therefore, becomes, though, do you think we need a lot more competitors, both in chips and even in LLMs? I mean, one of the things we've started to see is because a lot of the big companies can't really, I mean, I think there's a view that regulators wouldn't allow combinations, that there's this whole acqui-hire trend. And I'm curious sort of where you land on the competition and acqui-hire world.
Well, I think what we're seeing right now is ferocious competition, especially at the AI model level. And I think that's good, and we want that to continue. At the chip level, it's true that Jensen has very high market share, but that's a result of him being so ahead of the curve on GPUs. I mean, he's been working on this for 30 years. When everyone else was focused on CPUs, he had this vision around GPUs. And so, you know, in America, we don't punish winning. You know, we don't punish success that comes from as a result of being visionary. And I do think, though, that NVIDIA, although they have high market share, they have a lead, but it's such a competitive industry still, the semiconductor business, that if they don't stay on top of their game, then they could lose to a number of companies that are challenging them, including startups. So I don't think we have a huge competition problem here. I think quite the contrary, these markets are very competitive.
Hey, David, thank you very much for joining us today. David Sachs, we hope you come back.